So thanks everybody for joining this evening. And as I mentioned, we'll go through about 6 or 7 steps here where I think you can really take this opportunity to grow your business when, quite frankly, others aren't paying attention. Whether that's a distraction for survival, because that is the reality of today's market for a lot of businesses, or just getting stuck in the weeds and thinking, not forward thinking because we're just living the moment and we feel trapped in this pandemic and there's a great opportunity to grow. So for some of you, this may be, yeah, knew it already, thanks for the reminder. For a lot of you, it may be, geez, didn't think of it that way. And for some of you, it may be, yeah, I knew it, but wasn't actioning it. Thanks for the heads up. And I hope that's what you get out of this evening. So I'll take you through each of those points. At the end of each one, we'll take a break. If anyone has any questions and wants to come on camera, by all means, feel free. And if not, I'll post this on my website at the end as another piece of content that's free, of course, for you to use. And if you want to dive a little deeper, you can reach out to me, do a free diagnosis meeting. I'm happy to spend an hour with you and spend a little bit more detail. So, sadly, as I mentioned, people are struggling, but there is opportunity. It's funny because I was the president of a home building company in Burlington. After being a VP in previous home building companies, I was in sports and entertainment. And most recently, over the last year, I was a victim of, the COVID temporary layoffs. The gentleman who owned the company, 10 years younger than me, great guy, love him to death, huge heart, but obviously didn't need the president's salary while he was going through this. It was the first place to cut for a small company. And I had actually raised my hand and said, if you're going to cut any roles during this, it starts with me. You ran it yourself for 10 years. You don't need me now. I will step up and take that hit first. Me on it. And you know what? I'm glad he did. And the reason I share that is that's the theme of this evening. For me, I've been really struggling over the years to take that risk and go the entrepreneurial route and do what I really love. And now's the perfect time for me to dive in because I'm sitting at home, whether that was on a temporary layoff or deciding that it was time to change career. How do I dedicate all my efforts to the things I know how to do and share that with others? And I looked around my organization and everybody was working from home, but we weren't building and there was no investment. So how do we improve skills in that time? And we did a little bit of that. So I'm going to share that this evening on where you may be able to use that for your business. So first of all, I want to talk about investment and leadership development. So, if you have a small business, consider that in yourself. If you have a medium-sized business, consider that in your small management team. And if you have a large business, consider that in your executive team and your management team. I want to talk a little bit about coaching the coaches this evening and how you can do that to improve your revenue numbers and control your costs. I then want to talk a little bit about sales training. Some of the people on the call here are small business owners and have reached out to me about I've got a great idea. I've got some traction. I've got these great clients, but I'm not a salesperson. So how do I expose more people to this solution that already proving it's helping 3 or 4 good companies? How do I attract more? And then more importantly, how do you create more verticals to find more vertical buyers within the company? And I'll share what I mean by that. Then I want to talk about some new revenue streams for you. I want to talk about some strategic planning opportunities. If you're not doing strategic planning, now's a great time to start. I'm doing my own. I've got my own 5-year plan on this 1-week-old company. A lot of steps between now and then, but it's certainly a time, if you haven't done the discipline in the past, to be less intimidated by it and re-engage with it now. And I'll share some very simple steps on how to do that this evening. And lastly, one of the things, when I was at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment as a general manager of BMO Field, I opened that stadium and I also had the responsibilities as senior director of the Air Canada Center at the time. And one of the scary parts of my job, because I had security, event services, consumer products, food and beverage, ticket op, you name it. But the security side of the business was really scary, but I learned a valuable lesson. Organizations like that have planned for this 10 years ago. And they had business continuity plans in place that said, hey, if there is an explosion at Union Station, for heaven's sakes, because that's where the Air Canada Center was, and the office gets, into serious trouble and people can't come in, how do we continue to operate? And what does that communication cycle look like? How do we keep the business running? And so, they were looking at that a decade ago. And small businesses should absolutely be looking at that now so they can learn from the lessons they've had through this little pandemic challenge, and be ready for the next wave or the next pandemic. And let's hope it never comes, but let's be prepared for it. So I'd like to finish with that and then open it up to some questions. So First off, let's start with the fun stuff that I know everyone's looking for some guidance on, and that's revenue generation in a time where it feels like people aren't buying. And that's the biggest struggle right now. I will tell you that one of the disciplines that should always be in place for you as a single owner, if you're selling your product, for your team, if you're a medium-sized to large-sized business, is focusing on the behaviors to connect with prospects and clients. You know, and there's been a bunch of sales training out there. There are people who will teach you how to overcome objections and ask for the opportunity. And honestly, it's been the same sales training for 20 years. What they don't teach you how to do is master the art of inquiry versus advocacy. And really, that's where you have the opportunity to grow your business. And to do that, you have to investigate into your prospects. You have to investigate into your current relationships. You've got to find out what they really need and find out what the problems are, and then come with your offering tailor-suited to that client's need. And that there's an art behind that, and there's behaviors behind that, and it can be trained. Again, purpose tonight is give you some free content, walk away with it. If you ever need help with that, that's what I do. I've built it in multiple companies, like large B2B organizations with 10,000 accounts to small home builders building 150 homes a year. And the behaviors have stuck across the industries. And what it comes down to is really looking at a different way to sell and focusing more on the front end than driving volume and doing 200 calls and measuring how long the call was and then the conversion rate. Shallow the pool and stock it with fish. And the way you do that is you got to understand where those fish are, and you got to get them into that pond. And the way you do that is understand their business and then find out what the problem is and tailor your solution again towards it. And again, I could share more detail about that, but one of the things you want to be looking at right now is investing in how to understand what your clients need so you can connect in a way they haven't had from you before. And then you've got to think about vertical revenues. And what I mean by that is when you look inside a business account that you have today, maybe they've stopped buying from you. Or maybe 3 of your 10 clients have said, hey, times are rough. The CRB isn't even covering my staffing needs for this year. So we've really reduced what we're doing and going to market with or projects by 70%. The question becomes, in that 30% that they're still doing, how much of that business have you traditionally had? And are you introducing them to more that you can do to grab more of that minimal share? Because you've always been known as, I'll jump off different industries that I've been in. I'll take, the printing example. When I was with an organization called the Printing House, one of the things we trained the managers on was vertical penetration, because you may have the law office's law printing business. You've always been their guy. You've always been the go-to. They go to you with all their big case files and preparation, but you haven't penetrated the vertical buyers within the organization that manage their events, do their advertising. And yet you've got this network that you can do large format for this law printing firm, but you're still doing their black and white and their stationery because you haven't opened yourself up to investigating their business, understanding it, and then connecting with that existing relationship you have today and building more revenue streams. So you can build revenue within existing accounts. It's not just about acquiring new accounts. And then, of course, if you're going to follow that philosophy, you want to look at your business and you want to find new revenue streams. What is your core competency that you can tweak and take to more customers and existing customers? So let's say you're in 3D virtual tours in real estate, and you've got 4 home builders that buy those 3D virtual tours to show their customers what's going on with their floor plans, get a better feel than a black and white black and white drawing. Well, does that technology sit off of a technology where you can help them do other things for their clients online that can generate revenue, like perhaps interior selections? When a home buyer buys a brand new home, what do? They go into a house, a model home, and they look at the tile and they hold it up and they look at the hardwood and they do all those things and they physically look at it, but are you bringing them to a builder in a manner that they can differentiate from their clients so they can put it online and they can generate revenue online or capture the customer and help their conversion rate, which in turn generates value for your service? It's a silly example from my real estate background. And so What are you doing with new vertical growth within those accounts? What are you doing with new product development to capture what seems to be a dwindling market? But imagine if you can capture a new revenue stream that you didn't have before, what's it going to look like when the buyer comes back? And the theme being is pay attention to that stuff now. You know, one of the things I've always seen out of owners or executive teams that I've had the pleasure to lead, there's always something in the way. Yeah, but I got to get all that invoicing done, and the AP department's doing all their invoicing now, and finance is doing month end, so we can't get to that process or strategic action item that we wanted to do. We'll do it next month. You know what, I know in product development, we really want to develop new revenue streams, but we're still trying to perfect the one we have now, and this big customer wants it, so we'll get to it next month. Now's your time. Now's your time to invest in business development and figure out those behaviors. Now's your time to find more revenue streams with your existing customer, and now's the time to develop new revenue streams. I'm gonna leave my last point really to expand on at the end, because I believe it's the platform for all of this stuff, and I believe it's where a lot of organizations get stuck. But before we can get there, you know, you need a plan. So it's all great for me to sit there and say, you know, you got to train behaviors. You got to train a sales team or yourself to find more opportunity within existing relationships by inquiring versus advocating. You got to develop new revenue streams. You got to acquire new accounts by being a really good investigator and really getting on a customer's radar. But none of that matters if it's not in the context of a plan. So another thing you might want to be considering right now through this pandemic, if you've never gone through a strategic planning process, stop and start now. If you have gone through a strategic planning process in the past, you should be stopping right now and rebuilding it based on the pandemic. What has it done to your business? Now, what are your strategies and objectives and tactics? Now, what are your 5-year financial goals? Now, what does your SWOT analysis look like for strength, weaknesses, opportunity, and threat? And that should be impacting your plan moving forward. So if you don't have that discipline, you can't lay out what you want to do. You can't measure how it's going to get done, and you can't put any KPIs, financial goals against it to see if you're actually turning the radar. So I would strongly recommend, you know, in the following order, get a plan in place. If it's sales driven, if it's customer service driven, if it's operationally driven, if it's a marketing focused strategic plan, get it out there, find your checkpoints, put your measurables against it, and then fill your gaps. And that may mean you, a member of your team, and maybe a third-party consultant, right? But start to close those gaps, because you know where you want to go, and you just may need some help in understanding how to get there. So get that plan in place, get it measured, and make it a continuous piece month over month to measure it. You can come out of this stronger than ever because a lot of businesses aren't paying attention. Then next, get that revenue stream in line. If you can develop no sources of revenue, get there. Get your sales behaviors trained, whether that's you as an individual owner or your sales team that is focused on inquiry versus advocacy. We are bombarded with sales messages now as a society. And we wonder why we can't convert. Because no one wants to listen to us. Because they can tell when you go to sell, it's about you. It's not about them, it's about you. And there is a talent and a skill that needs to be developed there to teach people how to sell properly behaviorally. Do that from a new account acquisition perspective, and again, that vertical growth within an existing account. And if you don't have that competency in-house, get some support externally or even hire that talent. Then above all of this, right? So we talked about all those points. You have a choice as a leader today. Do you want to be directive or do you want to be servant? And I'm not telling you that one is better than the other. Okay, I will tell you the one that resonates with me is servant leadership. And servant leadership often gets talked about. And you know, the one thing that inspires me, but also frustrated me is, as someone who has grown a successful career doing this, is that, you know, you got all these great speakers that speak about servant philosophy and serving others and how it's the way to go and how it creates the most engaging workforces. But no one tells you how to do it. You know, they tell you, you got to be willing, you got to believe in it, you got to serve other people first. But there's a way to actually do it. There's behavioral anchors you can put in place to lead people through servant leadership philosophy that can get measured, just like a business plan. while still serving others. And that involves development from a one-on-one perspective, career development, whether that's a personal development strategy, management by walking around when you're observing your team work, visiting with customers with those employees to see how the behaviors are happening, and then coming back with all that feedback and serving your team. But there is structure you can put in place, and I can absolutely help you with that if that's something you want to talk about at some point. Lastly, before I kind of take a deep breath, because that was a lot, you know, business continuity plans. I hope what everyone's learned from this is we've encountered something we've never been prepared for. And quite frankly, most businesses don't talk about what happens when the world stops, because it kind of did. The best businesses are going to get off their feet quickly because they have a plan in place and have been preparing for this while not distracting from their regular operations. So I shared that example of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment where we built that business continuity plan. And that looked like 3 different scenarios of severity. And each of those scenarios had different action items from a communication, operation, and revenue generation perspective. So what events could or couldn't happen depending on the disaster? If they couldn't, what was phase 2 look like? Who was involved? Was Richard Petty at the time the CEO at home? Bob Hunter was on site. I was accountable for what we called the West Campus, which was Ricoh Coliseum and BMO Field. And I would be the touch person on that one and dealing with the staff. And then we had a phone chain of the managers, but not just, you know, okay, well, how do we get back up and running? How do we do efficiently and quickly depending on the scenario? And if you haven't thought of a business continuity plan, I would strongly recommend you find a consultant who can do it. And I hope we never have to use it again. But I think people should learn from this pandemic that we need to be prepared for it and be prepared for a second wave. So I leave that with, you know, probably not the most exciting part of the the points of guidance I'm trying to give this evening, but it is a reality. How do you prepare for that next wave and have the minimal impact to your business? There is a discipline called business continuity planning that you should be going through and learning from this. So if I had to sum all of that up before I open it up to questions, and it's been 21 minutes and I was hoping to do this in 20 to 25, because again, I do want to share it on the website. There's a lot of people in the weeds right now and they're struggling. And I think it's just a filter on how you look at this pandemic. Do you look at this as the chance to finally do everything you've been putting to the side and prepare for the future? Or do you look at it and say, okay, well, I better control every cost because the revenue's not coming in and this is going to last as long as it lasts. And I think if you take the approach on some of the points I shared earlier, you'll be shocked at how much revenue you can find. You'll be shocked at the business that you have a core competency in that you just don't have the discipline yet to go to market with and offer it. And above all, if you can do that strategic planning piece and implement servant leadership, you will find your team will quickly bring you the answers you don't have and help you get through this difficult time. So that was a whole heck of a lot. And I don't know how much quicker I could have done it. So I think the easiest way is to open it up to some questions now. If anyone has any, sorry. Just maybe raise your hand or just go ahead on mic and jump in. Yeah, Jim, go ahead. I can see your hand. How you doing?
Good, Mark. I'm seen to be in the shadows here, but it was good presentation. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It looks glorious where you are right now, by the way.
It's glorious outside right now. Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. You mentioned something, Mark, about training behaviors versus teaching behaviors. And so, I feel like that I'm always teaching people to do something, a behavior of sales, but it's like the message is not always resonating very deep. So there's probably something different between teaching and training that I'm not getting. What's the difference between teaching and training behaviors?
Yeah, and I think what it comes down to is teaching I'm more aligned with philosophy. So I can talk about business development and I can talk about revenue growth and finding new verticals. Training is about showing a team how to do it. It's about doing role plays. It's about transferring the behavior, and then it's about measuring it. So as an example, in each of these sales organizations that I went to and created the training from scratch, I did a few things, Jim. One is I observed the marketplace and find out what the opportunity was. Then I observed how we sold and how we went to market. I identified the gaps, and then I aligned the behaviors that needed to be performed to close those gaps. And then I set a training program with those expectations. I train them. So physically show how to do it, get sign off and certification. And then I create a coaching program to measure it on an ongoing basis, recognize, reward, and tweak. Because if you don't put the measurable in the back end, then the training doesn't stick. So you got to show people how to do it, get them engaged in the process, certify that they can get it done, and then measure it and coach and recognize and reward. And you know, depending on the size of the organization or how you sell, sometimes it's not conducive to it, sometimes it is. You know, I even brought in a third-party marketing, mystery shopping firm where they built a recognition program, and they went out and observed it to make sure objectively those behaviors were still being performed. But more importantly, it was setting up the team to not be in a gotcha game. It was a gotcha doing it right game, and here's a reward, right? And so whether that's mystery shopping, whether that's your observations, that to me is where you go from teaching a philosophy to training a behavior and making it stick.
Yeah.
Hope that helped.
That was good. Thank you.
Awesome. I apologize that my signal isn't so great if my voice isn't matching my lips here. Bear with me. I can see it breaking up a little bit. Anybody?
It's all good.
Mike.
Yeah, Mark. My video still doesn't work, so at least you get a picture of what I look like.
There you go. And I've met you, Mike, I think so.
Yes, you have. We met at your office in Burlington.
Yeah.
The inquiry versus advocacy aspect I like. Whenever I meet with a new client or prospect, I always like to know who I'm dealing with beforehand. Doesn't always work, but is there anything you can? Advocacy is obviously selling our services. Inquiry is asking what they need. Is that how you interpret that?
Yeah, you're bang on. And it's not, when you'll hear me speak of inquiry versus advocacy, sometimes it gets confused that I believe one over the other. And that's not what it is. It's the balance, right? Because if you spend all your time advocating, but you don't inquire to find the relevancy to the customer and customize the approach for them, it doesn't stick. But you are bang on that inquiry is about finding out about them, and advocacy saying how you can solve the problem. The better you are at investigating that and using the tools available to build that relationship and connect, the easier it is to get the prospect on the phone. The easier it is once the relationship is built to get more vertical sales, because at the end of the day, you're showing value back to the client. Every time you promote something like this, they know it's because you understand their business and it's helping them succeed. And too often in our sales world, we get down to the, oh God, I got to make 37 calls and I got to convert at 8%. An X amount of average transaction, and that's going to give me the revenue. We know our margin is X, so there's the formula. And then we wonder why we get stuck. And so, you know, to answer your question and use it as a platform, your art in inquiry, which can be trained, is critical before you can go to advocacy. You know, I used that printing house example earlier on. As we went out and we said, you know, what do we do differently? And I call them boomerang facts. And the reason I call them boomerang facts, and that's one of the few things I've made up in my career, I'm a really good best practicer, right? So things I've learned in organizations, I take, make my own, grow, develop, and apply them to the challenge at hand. But boomerang fact is something I came up with because in the home buying industry, I'll stray from printing just for a second. In the home buying industry, the way the customer shops, still shockingly, they do all that stuff online. They are following you on social, but at the end of the day, a home buyer likes to get in their car and drive to the sales center on an afternoon on a Saturday. Kind of like how they like to buy. And so they're going to visit sales centers and they're going to ask the same questions in each and every sales center. And if you can train a team to find out what's important to the customer, have some dialogue proper, and I'll give you an example, and then leave them with something as they're going to shop your competitor that forces them to come back to you, that's a boomerang fact. And you have to find those for your business. So customer walks in the sales center. Most sales centers say, hi, how are you today? How many bedrooms would you like? 1 garage or 2, and throw over the floor plan and say, this one is X per square foot at X price, and we can build it by X date. That's kind of the way it looks. What we were able to build in the past was say, hold on, let's have some emotional needs dialogue first. Why are you moving? Tell me about how you live today. Tell me how you would change life in the summer in your new home. Tell me how you'd change it in the winter. What do you not have in your house that you wish you had today? And all of those are inquiry-driven questions. And then our sales professionals were trained to advocate. How do we do that better? And put in a boomerang fact, which help with that advocacy. As an example, I heard you say today that you've had a bit of a horror story with other new home builders and that makes you a little nervous about buying new. Well, let me tell you about Fusion at the time, our record with Tarion. We've won 6 Tarion Awards, which the home buyer actually votes on. This isn't an association award. This is the home buyer in Ontario. No company's won more than 2. We've won 6 out of the last 8 years. That's a boomerang fact. They're going to walk to another sales center and they're going to say, tell me about your Tarion record. And there is no way they're not coming back to us. So if you can start to put that context around inquiry versus advocacy, you just have to train people how to find that in a client or a prospect or an existing relationship. And then you need to train them on how to advocate that differentiates you over your competitors. Thanks for asking that question, Mike, because I love that question.
Awesome.
I hope I answered your question.
One thing I was going to note is that I, like you, I've taken this pandemic to go back, especially the first 4 to 6 weeks. I've done my first really in-depth business plan, and so I'm grateful for this time off.
Yeah, it's like if you don't do it now, you're never going to do it. So like, how do you capitalize on this forced opportunity? Because that's really what's happened. You know, we've been across the world put into this forced opportunity.
Exactly.
And it's a challenge, and yes, it has an impact to our business, but here is your forced opportunity to do a proper plan. Now, on the theme of strategic planning, not that you asked, Mike, but you'll see once in a while I get on my soapbox, just knock me off if it becomes annoying. I don't have a problem with that. But as you build your plan, word of caution. This is where plans fall apart. They don't engage other people who have to execute the plan in the planning process. So we sit at an executive table and we say, okay, we want to grow by 5 million profit over the next 5 years. Our EBITDA, to do that, we need to generate a 27% sales increase year over year for the next 5 years and reduce costs and all these things. And here's going to be our objective. We're going to do it this way. Here's the tactics. Here's exactly how we're going to do it. And here's how we're going to measure it. Oh, wait a second. We didn't ask the people who actually deal with our customers if this will even work. We didn't engage them in the reality of our business today. And now we're going to push downwards our strategic plan on our team without engaging them upwards in the plan, and they're not going to buy in. So as you do those, continue to do that. I'm sure you do. Engage your team, measure it on a regular basis, make it part of weekly one-on-ones with your key players. And give them a say. You know, one of the things that's frustrated me the most in my career of leading these, you know, and it happens everywhere. We all have our weaknesses and our strengths. But, you know, whether it's the TELUS Mobilities, the Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, Fusion Homes, the Roots, the Athletes World, wherever my career has taken me at various levels, owners and executives sometimes don't want to listen to the feedback that they have to hear. And what I mean by that is, you know, if you've got 1 out of 100 people screaming that the sky is falling and you got to change the way you do things, hey, that's a one-on-one coaching conversation and hear them out. But if you have a mechanism to get the feedback and 86% of your staff are saying, listen, we can't build that product in that time frame anymore. It's too complicated. We can't get it done. We need to change our process, change our offering, or change the time to do it. You got to listen to those 86 people out of 100. So how much do you engage the team to get their feedback in your process, and how do you measure it as you execute it and roll it out, and where do you involve them in the wins? Thanks, Mike. Anybody else? Yep, go ahead, Jim.
Mark, I've been following you on social.
I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. A lot of people. And I follow your message closely about servant leadership, which is, I mean, it's certainly a great way to proceed. Sometimes I find directive leadership more efficient and effective, and maybe you need kind of a healthy dose of both. But how did you land on the side of servant leadership versus directive leadership? Is that just sort of inherent in you, or did you decide that one side is better than the other?
That's a really good question, Jim. And that's why I said at the beginning, I don't believe one's right and one's wrong. It has to be a personal choice. And I'll give you 2 reasons why I have chosen servant leadership and continue with it. It has allowed me to scale organizations. being servant to develop other leaders to be servant forces me to pass down the skills for others to be successful because I hold myself accountable to the measurable result. So if I can't serve others to make them successful and they're willing, is the problem with them or is the problem with me? Now, if I give them the knowledge and they're not willing to accept it, servant leadership does have its limits. At some point, it's like, hey, I've given you the skills. I'm on your side. I'm giving you all you need. You're choosing not to do it. That's not a teachable point of view here, you know? And so that's been one. I've been able to scale businesses and grow my career and the career of others through that approach. Secondarily, and more importantly, it's the way I was raised, Jim. My dad was a military guy. We bounced around bases from Nova Scotia to Quebec, and he was the discipline in the family. So he's where I get my kind of strategic planning, organized approach. My mom was my rock in my world, and she raised 5 boys. And she was the one that I can remember the behavior as a kid, not knowing until I was in my 40s what I was seeing, and nor was she even probably doing it other than organically being herself. Everybody had to be happy before her. You know, she was always concerned about the neighbor whose parents didn't have Expos tickets and bringing them along to sit in the 700 yellows nosebleeds in the Big O with us in the family. She did that not to be recognized or rewarded. She did it because it made her happy seeing other people enjoy experiences. So when I put mom and dad together, and then I got into business, and as I started, it was very much, well, you know, I'm the best store manager in the district, and look at my stats and everything. And I realized, yeah, my numbers were good, but I wasn't moving ahead because I was a bit of an asshole. And I'm not suggesting that a directive leadership style makes you an asshole. Some people need clear cut, let's go, let's do it. I just find that it doesn't resonate with me. That the minute I turned and said, I'm going to trust my career is going to grow as long as I take care of other people and transfer my skill. And those skills usually came from somebody else transferring them to me. I'm going to do okay. So that's how I chose that. But I got to tell you, I've worked for some directive leaders, and I have just as much respect for them as some of the great servant leaders I've had in my career.
I'd like to comment on that quickly.
Hi, Rick.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you go ahead. You wanted to comment?
Sure.
Me? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
good.
go ahead.
Oh, sorry, guys. Okay, Thomas, let's start.
Hey,
We'll go back to Rick. We'll go back to Rick. Thanks, Rick. Go ahead, Thomas.
Okay. Just wanted to make a quick note on the directive leadership. I see the value in it depending on who you're working with. But when I worked in larger corporations as a consultant going in, and I've worked with other engineers and technicians, I found that working on the servant method, we got much better results because you kind of put the responsibility on each person and you don't stunt the growth. I had an extreme example in one corporation that I worked for. They changed their leadership style. We were basically working as servant leaders. All of us had heart in the company, and they started becoming dictative, and they did micromanagement, and it basically killed the company, literally. So I have a bit of a passion for the servant leadership style. And I based it on what Stephen Covey wrote on the 8th habit, especially about the synergy that gets created. When you get really inspired people working on something, I think you can be way more effective. And ultimately, it's just more enjoyable when you do it as a team effort, not when you're told what to do and just go mechanically go do it.
Yeah, and I
think that's, to me, an older way.
Yeah, I agree, Thomas. And I think, and I'm going to pass it over to Rick. I think for me, it's also adjusting to the workforce and the young professional. And, you know, millennials take and I think we're even past millennials now, they get a bad rap. And you know what? Actually, I look at them and say, you know what? They don't put up with shit. They won't put up with poor leadership. They
right.
put up with a workforce that isn't engaging them and keeping them inspired and making them a part of the solution and developing their skills because they can go somewhere else. You know, my father used to tell me, just your boss tells you what to do, you shut your mouth, you bring it to work, you do it, and you go home.
Yeah.
For me, servant leadership just seems to align a little more with the workforce that's coming up today. You can fight it or you can adapt, and that's Rick, sorry, I'm gonna bring it back to you.
No problem. Thank you. Not really a question. I just wanted to tell you that I really enjoy your message, and I wanted to be supportive of you as you've just entered into a realm here that Canada is in in real need of. Business owners really need us. And I'm in Western Canada, so we're not competing with each other. But I follow you on LinkedIn and have met you before. So I just really wanted to say that I really enjoyed your message and everything that you're doing there.
Thanks, Rick. I really appreciate that. I hope you don't. Do you mind if I share who you're with, Rick? I know you weren't looking for.
You can do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So Rick's with Action Coach Canada, and he's a senior leader there. I have been working with Action Coach Canada, considering a franchise and trying to make that work because just some of the amazing content that they have and the supportive nature that organization offers people like myself, and whether that comes to fruition or not. What you just heard out of Rick is everything I've gotten out of Rick and Dale, and Brad Sugar's the guy who runs it internationally. I was lucky enough to sit on the meeting. So if you are looking for a business coach, I mean, clearly I'm here. Whether
you are
at some point or on my own, I would strongly recommend wherever you are to have a look at them as well. They do great services. So Rick, thank you. I just generally appreciate it.
I've really enjoyed this. And Jim, I was also going to say that beer you've been drinking looks pretty good. You're a dark beer man, right after my heart. So
cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah, I'll be having one tomorrow night. I'm doing a podcast, and I've been encouraged to bring beer to the podcast, so I'm looking forward to it. Anybody have any other questions, or if you don't, that's cool. I'll post this on my website, and I plan to do this once a month and share some content. If you have any questions, let me know, and if not, do this another time.
Question for you, Mark.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So we spoke about it in the past, but in terms of how much time you spend with new clients and then on existing clients, going after new clientele, what kind of strategies would you put in place when you're attracting new clients, and how much time would you spend in that split where you're servicing existing clients, trying to find new business there versus actually trying to go after new clients altogether?
Yeah, I think it's the phase that your business is at, Rob. So like if a lot of businesses, when they're starting up, they're really got to get out there. They got to get known. They got to get their foot in the market. So that would be heavily acquisition based. So you'd really be trying to find out more about accounts you can bring on board and how. When you find you're starting to top off that ability to add new and your revenue stagnating, you definitely want to start to talk about new offerings for those clients by better understand. And there's a couple ways to do that. So, I talked earlier about you creating new offerings, but what you have already, you can penetrate a business two different ways. So you can go to the buyer you have today and offer more services, more verticals, and grow your revenue with that buyer. Or you can get the endorsement of that buyer as you understand the organization better and get into more buyers within that existing organization. So let's use the mobility companies, the telecommunication companies. I worked at TELUS about, 20 years ago. And there was 5 major channels at that time. And there were 5 levels of executive teams in each of those channels. And if you were really good at providing a service, if you knew about those other channels, you had your referral right there in front of you if you had a good relationship with your existing buyer. So how do you get in front of other buyers within the organization, depending on the scope? And the best way to do that is find out what they need, be a student of their business, and they get that endorsement from that buyer. To answer your question, if you were at 10 major companies as an example, and you were dealing with one buyer, I would be spending more time finding more buyers while I did a little bit of account acquisition. But I would tell you, if you're just starting and you've got 3 to 4 accounts, your bigger bet is to find more accounts and then go vertical within those organizations to continue your revenue stream growth. Because it actually takes a lot of intellectual property from that relationship that you have first to grow that opportunity, right? You can't just jump into a new account and say, well, I know Gina or I know Dave. Hey, you know what I do now, tell everyone in your company, okay? That usually doesn't work. Well, first ask, because a lot of people don't even ask. But if you're going to ask in from a manner that's going to make them look good as the referral in the rest of their organization, you have to understand that business a little better. So I hope that helped, because it really just depends on what stage your business is at. I'm reading a book, and I love YouTube now because everything's in video, so you can watch all the keynote speakers and authors do their speech and not have to read the book. I know that sounds easy. I call it efficient. But I'm reading a book by a gentleman who was referred to me from another consultant in Ottawa. Her name is Lisa Larder, and she referred me to Alan Weiss. And Alan Weiss, in his book, $1 Million Consulting, which I think is like a few editions behind for him. Like I think he wrote this quite a while ago. He's got a few other ones out. He spoke to the fact of the mistakes he was making as a consultant at looking for new business and not looking from within because he just didn't ask. So he's in the Hall of Fame of keynote speaking, I think is one of the things he refers to in the book. He had a client for consulting and they came to him and said, hey, like we're doing this big event. We'd really like a good keynote speaker. Like, can you refer us to anyone? And he went, like, I'm in the hall, man. Like, I'm your guy. But even he learned that lesson early on that you gotta deliver to one buyer and then educate yourself on what else is out there. Hope that helped, Rob.
Appreciate that, Mark.
Got it. Anything else? You know, I'm happy to talk all night, but if there's no questions, I'm not going to force them. My mom always said I had verbal diarrhea and a face for radio. So I'll leave you with that inspiration. You guys know where to find me. I am on you can go to my website. I'll post this video. There's other content there if you want to have a look at it. I'm more specific about some of the things we talked about tonight. So you can click on those as individual individual topics in my services page. And then the email is real simple. It's Mark, M-A-R-C, at markpetitpas, M-A-R-C-P-E-T-I-T-P-A-S.com. This was fun. I really appreciate you guys all joining, and I really appreciate you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks very much.
Awesome.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Cheers, everyone. Have a great night.
Bye.
Thanks, Mark.
You got it.
Mark, I'm going to contact you. I'm going to go through your website first, though.
Feel free, man.
Yeah, because there's some incentives right now